Do you feel optimistic about your future? If you're a Gen Z person, like me, the truth is that you probably don't. The bright, optimistic future that many of us were promised as children has evaporated before our very eyes as we've become adults. And the point of this video is to ask the question, is this actually true? Are we cooked as a generation? Now, I'm not going to treat doomerism as some kind of silly internet meme in this video, but instead I'm actually going to present the reasons that Gen Z across the board seems to be showing signs of doom, despair, and nihilism about the future. And you can take the information that I present and you can come to your own conclusion. Now, the big reason for this sense of doom, for this sense of despair among Gen Z is the collapse of the social contract. This path that our parents and our grandparents followed, where they went to school, then university, then they got a job, then a mortgage, and they were able to retire comfortably. Us Gen Z people, we were told by our parents to follow this path and we would be secure, we would be set up for life. But many of us now, we're coming to the end of our school days, we're graduating from university, and we're realizing, hold on a second, that's not the case. I'm 24 years old and I'm doing worse off than my parents were at the same age. Now, I think that every other marker of Gen Z nihilism, the loneliness, the addictions, the depression, the whole lot is tied back to this collapse of the social contract. Because when this fell apart, so did our hopes for the future. And I'm going to show you this now with an example. I'm going to show you how the social contract completely fell apart here in Ireland and the consequences of that for young people. Now, don't worry. What's happening in Ireland is happening in basically every first world democratic country. The signs of decline here are basically the same as where you are living as well. So let's start with the housing situation. Housing for young Irish people is insanely unaffordable. Whether you're trying to rent your own place or buy your own place, it doesn't matter. Home ownership for Irish people between the ages of 25 and 39 is at 7%. That's me. I'm 26. I have a 7% chance of owning my own home in the country that I was born. That's insane. So this is the reality that many young Irish people are growing up in. There's this sense, we understand that we'll never be able to afford our own homes in our own country. And what is this doing to people psychologically? Well, I'm going to show you an example here. Now, this example is from a girl called Katie. She's 22 years old, she's studying at university, and she's living in Dublin with her parents. And she's saying this: I don't see myself moving out of home for the next 5 to 10 years. It's just not viable. The rent is astronomical. I'm stuck at home. Don't get me wrong, my mom and sister are great, but it just doesn't feel natural. You feel like you're stuck in the stage of being teenagers. She goes on. She believes the social contract has been broken and says that this has taken its toll on her mental health. I just find sometimes you're a bit hopeless. You're working for all of this and you're seeing yourself stuck in the same position. When you look back at my parents' generation, when my mom was 23, she had a mortgage. She had me. She had moved out of her parents' house. She was a lot more progressed in life than where I would be right now. Miss O'Reilly thinks the government has 100% forgotten about people like her. Now, this is not an isolated or an extreme example. I think about myself. I could say the same thing as this woman. My dad, at my age, had a house, he had a car, he was married, and he had me. I am renting for half of my paycheck per month. We are not the same. And this is the problem that's happening across most of the democratic world. Young people are highly overqualified, but there are not enough jobs for them to take. Take this statistics that was recently released by the Bank of America. It says that young graduates account for more unemployment than the rest of unemployed people in the USA put together. That's also insane. But you think about what's happening here for a moment. Most of these university graduates would have come from middle-class backgrounds, but they're finding themselves becoming worse off than their parents. So the middle class is just evaporating. So there you go. That is a slice of the reality that we're experiencing as Gen Z right now. The world around us has become unaffordable. We can't afford to leave our parents' houses. We can't afford to live the lives of young people. In addition to that, we can seem to penetrate the job market. We can seem to get that leg up that we need to earn money. And you might say to this, well, if you know that this broken social contract is such a huge problem, it's causing you to be nihilistic, to be anxious, to be depressed, why wouldn't you as Gen Z, as young people, get together and try and vote to change this problem, to change the social contract in your favor? This is where we get into the meat of the problem. You see, the reason that the social contract has fallen apart is because most Western countries are going through a huge demographic crisis. Across most of the world right now, except for in Africa and of course Israel, birth rates are falling down. Nobody is having kids. And in addition to this, populations are aging rapidly. So what you've got is an increasing number of old people at the top and a very, very small and decreasing number of young people at the bottom of the system. And this is creating two huge problems for Gen Z. The first of which is that they're not having children. Now, why are Gen Z not having kids? I think this is a very easy question to answer. This girl on Twitter the other day asked a very innocent but honest question. She said, Italy is both, one, a very Catholic place, meaning they're not so big on the old contraception, and two, just generally very horny people. Yet their fertility rate is 1.2. Now, in order to maintain the population of your country, you need a replacement rate of 2.1. Italy is experiencing this problem. A lot of old people at the top, nobody having kids down at the bottom. Why is that? Well, young Italians can't afford to leave home. Simple as that. If you can't leave your parents' house, you're not going to bring your girl back and try and bang her there, are you? So this is why. Because we can't afford to leave home, nobody is having kids, or at least they're putting this off until later in life. That's our first problem. Now, our second big problem as Gen Z is a simple numbers problem. There's a lot more old people than there is of us. And old people, naturally, they're going to vote in their self-interest. They're absolutely entitled to do this. But what this means is that the old person, the boomers' end of the social contract, that they'll be able to retire, that they'll be afforded this will be met. And it will be met at the expense of our end of the social contract. That our taxes will go down, that we will have homes to move into. And I'm going to explain very, very quickly how this is going to happen. As I said, old people need their end of the social contract to be upheld. They need their pensions to be paid, they need quality healthcare, and they need infrastructure to be able to get around. But all of this stuff costs money, and these old people are largely not generating their own income anymore, so it's difficult to tax their income. So whose tax do you think is going to pay for all of these old people? That's right, you guessed it, it's me, and it's you, the Gen Z person who is working, who is in the system. Our taxes are going to go up across the board. Now, it might not be your income tax. Here in Ireland recently, they put up the carbon tax, for example. Why? Ireland has no carbon footprint whatsoever. We make no major impact to the global environment, and yet our carbon tax went up. Now, I don't think that's because our government here is particularly environmentally conscious. I think they're just aware of the demographic problem, but they don't want to say it out loud because they know what that's going to mean for young people, and young people are not going to be happy about it. So they have to do it in these very kind of covert ways where they put up random taxes or introduce new ones. Now, this might be slightly controversial, feel free to argue this in the comments, but I also think this is why governments are so keen to import cheap labor. Again, doesn't have many young people to tax, so if you bring more young people into the country, you can just tax them instead. Even if they come in illegally and they work for some business, they're still contributing to the GDP. And that's important because the GDP figure, it creates this illusion in the minds of boomers who vote for the government that the economy is continuing to prosper, that they will continue to have this very comfortable life in retirement until they kick the bucket. It's important for the government to do that because this big block of old people is voting for them. What I think is that the democratic governments and the people who run them are brutally incompetent, and they're trying to save their own ass. Basically, what's happening in your country is the political parties are playing hot potato over whose government it is that the complete and undeniable collapse of the social contract is going to happen in. Now, I think the social contract's already broken. That's what I can see. But the governments are still trying to gaslight you over this a little bit. They're trying to pretend that it's not happening. They're trying to paper over the cracks. But eventually, if they keep doing that, this problem's going to keep getting worse to the point where it's like undeniable. And you don't want to be the government in power when that happens. Now, what this means is that you, as a Gen Z person, are living in a completely parallel world to the boomers. Think about it from their point of view. They're at the end of the social contract. They vote, and the government largely gives them what they want. They think that their country is still prosperous. But they are, in effect, living in a lie. That's not true. All of these changes that I've described, this breakdown of the social contract, is happening just slow enough that they can't recognize it. It's outside of their perception. It doesn't really affect them at all, but it does massively affect you. This is why you can often get this sentiment from boomers that Gen Z people are just lazy and that they have this very negative attitude, and that's what's holding them back because they don't see the real problems that we're facing. The truth that you experience as a Gen Z person, and that I've shown in this video with statistics, is that your country is in a very steady decline, and this decline is brought about by demographic collapse. As a result of this, the old social contract is broken, and everybody in Gen Z can feel this. This old path of go to school, go to university, get a job, get a mortgage, and retire doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. This safety net that our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation had no longer exists. But nobody is admitting this. Not the government, not the media, not academia. Now, at the start of this video, I did claim that all the other elements of Gen Z, doom, nihilism, whatever you want to call it, all of these come from the collapse of the social contract. And I think it makes so much sense. Because if you could see that the world is declining all around you, like in front of your eyes, and whatever future you had hoped for has very, very quickly evaporated, what's your natural response to that very, very bleak reality? Of course, you would want to escape it. I think this is where a lot of social media addiction comes from. Now, another form of this escapism comes from the dating market, which Gen Z men and Gen Z women are checking out of at an alarming rate. Now, I already told you that neither Gen Z men or Gen Z women can really afford to leave their parents' households. That's affecting both of us. And then from the Gen Z guys' point of view, when we do manage to get our own income, this is largely taxed and inflated and paid away on rent. It basically goes out of our hands. So we can't build ourselves up into a position where we are an attractive proposition for women. And this basically then is leaving Gen Z women with a number of propositions themselves, because of course they're going to be naturally more constrained by time. Gen Z women can either choose to shack up with an older man who's already got things figured out, or a Gen Z guy who has managed to escape this kind of stuff. Or they could go down the completely degenerate path and earn their own money through something like OnlyFans out of sheer desperation. Or they could do the difficult thing and shack up with an average Gen Z guy. Well, if you do that, if you're responsible and you're an upstanding member of society, then, well, you will end up like Aisling here. She has been working since 17. She says she has absolutely nothing to show for it. The plan was education, a good enough job that will carry us, so her and her fiancé, through a pensionable job, then a house, get married, and then have kids. It's out the window. It's up in the air. It's literally paused. We don't know what we'll do. Everything is on hold to try and save this deposit for a house. And then once we have a deposit, we will never be able to go into a bidding war. We're not in a position. It's never ending. Very hard to keep motivated, to keep positive. It does have an effect on your mental health. It has an effect on your relationship because it's another stressor. She got engaged in 2022. She says, I wasn't even that excited. It was kind of like, yeah, well, we're not going to be able to get married for a good while because we need to focus on a house. I'm not planning my wedding because I can't afford to plan my wedding. Now, is this the type of future that would be appealing to you if you were a Gen Z woman? I can't imagine that it is. This is what's happening. Social contract breaks, with it goes the dating market, and then Gen Z people are going nuts. You've got women on one side doing OnlyFans and things like this out of sheer desperation. And on the other side, you've got Gen Z guys just giving up all hope because they have no idea of how they'll ever be able to attract anyone into their lives because their economic situation is so desperate. Gen Z people are also retreating from in real life institutions at an alarming rate. We don't trust institutions like schools, universities, or the government. In fact, young men are checking out of university at an alarming rate. It's as if young Gen Z guys have realized, hang on a second, something is up here. This institution isn't going to serve me. It's just going to land me in more debt and probably not going to get me a job. And you can see linked to this a rise in alienation, loneliness, and the decline of in real life communities. Again, you have to think big picture about this. Gen Z people, our vision of our future, this kind of optimistic vision, you'll be able to have a house, you'll be able to retire, this has gone. If this has been taken away from you, then why would you bother? Why would you bother to engage with the real world? What is the incentive to go out there and do these things? And I think this is also linked back to why young people aren't going out to nightclubs, to pubs, socializing, or even drinking as much anymore. Now, tied to this, there is no authentic Gen Z culture, because Gen Z people, we're not going out, we're not interacting with each other anymore. All of our culture basically happens online, and any real world culture that happens in your country is likely either inauthentic or it's geared towards nostalgia for people like the boomers. Now, I think this post kind of shows this problem happening again here in Ireland, but you can substitute this for your own country. The regime in Ireland has become so oppressive and pervasive, it's affecting and absorbing absolutely everything, including art and culture. Not only does all the backing go to dull, inspired, conformist shite, but like Sitka's spruce plantations, the whole ecosystem is effective and nothing else grows. It's a dull, grey, acidic, lifeless wasteland. There's a trend on TikTok of young Irish people noticing and taking the piss out of this. Nothing but Dermot Kennedy on the radio. Now, you can replace Dermot Kennedy for whatever singer's always on your radio stations, whether it's Ed Sheeran or Taylor Swift. It'll be something generic and awful like that. Chicken fillet rolls and spice bags. Every supposed cultural artifact now feels like a stale, contrived, forced, inane PR creation. Alienating regime slop. Consume your slop in the absence of anything real, tasty and nourishing. Consume the slop in the absence of home, heritage, identity, hope for the future, children, transcendence, or meaning. Definitely don't make art speaking to that. Just have another ironic Irish spice bag. That's your identity, that's who you are. So there you have it. Not only is your economic situation absolutely awful, you don't even get the luxury of having a counterculture that protests against it. You're going to be drip-fed, boomer-coded, surface-level cultural slop, and it's going to be 1968, and you're going to listen to rock and roll forever and ever and ever and ever until the end of time. Okay, so naturally you as a Gen Z young person, you want to escape this system by any means necessary. I think another phenomenon that popped up in the last couple of years is this idea for young people that we could escape the matrix, to use that very cliche term, but it is there. Many young Gen Z people, especially if they're ambitious and they can see this happening all around them, they feel this intense pressure to quote-unquote make it. Now, I've made a video about this before and the problems with it, but effectively, young guys are going online and they're trying to say, well, how do I make money? Because clearly this is the operative problem. Money is being taxed and inflated out of my hands, so if I just make more of it, then I can escape this system, or at least the worst parts of it. Now again, you'll remember that I said you live in a completely parallel world as a Gen Z person from the boomers who are in the government, who are in academia, who are in the media, who are behind the media. And this is why the media are so out of touch with what Gen Z people are going through. And here's an example of that. This headline from the main broadcaster here in Ireland says, experts are concerned that perceptions of masculinity held by significant numbers of young men are being shaped and distorted by negative narratives and communities online. Ridiculous. It's not that young men are going online and we're suddenly becoming radicalized. No. We are escaping from this hellish reality that you've created. That's what is happening. The social contract, as it is, means that we can't buy houses and we can't save any money. That is why we are being influenced and seduced by the likes of Andrew Tate. And like him or not, he is at least trying to present a solution. Is it a solution I agree with? No, it isn't. But at least he's putting something on the table. More than you can say. Now, of course, as Gen Z people, retreat from the real world and we go more and more into the online and virtual world, this is having a massive effect on our personalities. You'll have heard me say this on this channel many times before. This graph shows how our personalities have shifted since 2014, when most of us would have come online. This is really contributing to the mental health crisis in Gen Z. A big reason behind this is because we are going online, we are going on our social media algorithms, and what do we see? We see a lot of influencers who are about our age, maybe they're a little older, maybe they're a little younger even, and we are basically living through these influencers. They have escaped this kind of very hellish, demoralizing social contract because they've earned money, they're influencers. And we see them, they go out, they live the lives that we want to live. They drive fast cars, they hang around with other attractive young people. They're able to travel to many different destinations. It's like when you go to the zoo and you go to see all the wild animals. Except in this case, you're not the one outside the cage looking at the animals. You're the one, as a Gen Z person, as a normal Gen Z person, inside the cage, and you're looking out at all the influencers living their lives and having fun. That's another form of escape that we are going through. We're kind of living through these characters, and that's not good for us whatsoever. I think that's a huge contributing factor to the decline in Gen Z mental health. Worse still though, there are a section of Gen Z people who will, unfortunately, turn to suicide as a means to escape this reality that we've grown up into. And I think that's accurate. I think that is happening. I think there are a section of Gen Z people who, once they leave school and leave university, they suddenly realize how bleak things are for them. Economically, socially, culturally, that all hits them at once. And look, I know I've been able to outline the situation that we face as Gen Z in this video, but not every Gen Z person understands our situation to this extent. So again, when they leave school, when they leave university, or when they leave their parents' home, this all comes as a surprise to them. It hits them all at once. And I think a lot of them will lack the resilience or lack the support as well to cope with all of that happening at once. Ultimately, I think the doomer position is a natural one for Gen Z when you observe the facts of our situation. Most Gen Z people, even if they haven't fallen down the rabbit hole of online doomer content, have a very heavy, cynical attitude towards the future, where they can't ever seem to imagine it getting any better for themselves. And now, while there is undoubtedly content online that exploits and feeds into this Gen Z sense of doom, I don't think this content itself is creating Gen Z doomers or creating Gen Z nihilism. I think it's satisfying a need among these people who are already nihilistic and already very cynical. It's like they watch it to say, yes, please confirm it to me. The world is in decline. I'm not going crazy. The government is gaslighting me about this stuff. I am right. I'm not going insane. I think the truth for Gen Z is that we are living in a lie. That the governments and institutions are trying to convince us that the society around us is working absolutely fine, that there's nothing wrong. But the reality that we can see with our own eyes and our own experiences suggests otherwise. And this is incredibly frustrating, and it's causing young people to become doomers, to become cynical, and to lose hope in their future. I suppose I want to ask at this point of the video, could there be an antidote to this sense of doom? An attitude that we as a generation could adopt to take up against this decline. We can acknowledge that the decline is happening, but also adopt an attitude that is more forceful, that suggests, yes, I'm still going to live my life while I'm young and I'm full of energy. I think we could do this, but maybe I am naive. Anyhow, I will make a future video about this topic also. So if you're interested in that, please do subscribe and stick around. Also, let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below. Do you think that Gen Z are in fact doomed? Or maybe you're of the opposite position. Maybe you have some hope. And if so, why? Let me know. I would actually be fascinated to know, after hearing all of this, why are you still hopeful about the future? Or perhaps you're not a Gen Z person watching this video and you're absolutely baffled by how insane we are. Let us know your perspectives as well. I'd be fascinated to hear them also. And at the end of this video, if you found it interesting, please do consider helping me, helping my channel out. Subscribe, like, comment, share it with somebody who you think would find it interesting. And if you do all of that good stuff, then I guarantee you that the future will be nothing but sunshine and roses.